Okay, everyone, we're going to finally start our event. Sorry for the delay. Welcome, everyone, to the second series of This Is My Story. I'm honored and humbled to be speaking in front of all of you today and moderating and introducing our lovely speakers on behalf of Generation Indigenous and to be gathered here today on Treaty 7 territory. Most of us here today, including myself, are visitors to this land, and I'd like to acknowledge the relationships that we have with Siksika, Piikani, Kainai, Tsuut'ina, the Stoney Nakoda Nations, which includes Wesley, Chiniki, and Bearspaw First Nations, as well as the Métis Nation of Alberta Region 3. To begin our event, we'll have Elder Eileen Blacks open us with a prayer.
In our culture, one of the things that I was taught is to stand in to honor the honorable person in our time. It's important to keep this in mind, to keep the Creator in your thoughts and in your prayers. I'm going to say the prayer in my language. I think, but before I say that, I want to say this prayer that helped me to be where I'm at here. And that's the Serenity Prayer. Probably some of you know it, or maybe all of you know it. And it's, God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Ayo absudoki. Kinokit ka sa matulukis si Boy. Sa simatay si Boy. Nukadi sili ang sudaksina. Nakipo sili. Kistuwa absudoki. Dapi ko ito. Text ko na si Boy. Nukis si Boy. Nukat si mo ikam sa kapsing sa kumapit sa awa ko mo si. Sige masinan. O sa tabi mo Boy. O tis kumaway. Nukpat sa mo ikam sa nukis sa kapsing si itong mokins. Nukpat sa mo ni akapo sa itong kitabi ni nanin sa. Kiyong bisita sa nanin sa. Kistuwa absto kiwa ni kitabi ko ito na. Kinukay sa na na. Nukupamuta. Nukay ihiki. Tumitak pinakitak sa kanan itay. Creator, I ask for your blessing for all who is here today, and especially for the families in Saskatoon, Saskatchewan. Yeah.
Thank you, Eileen, for opening our event in a good way. Before we start, I'd just like to take care of some housekeeping. Just so you're aware, our fire exits are located on either side of the stage, as well as where you came in at the top. And the Calgary Public Library, please ask that you do not take the mugs. As well, we do have a social worker on hand. Her name is Christy. She's at the back there, waving her hand. And she's here to provide support as some of the topics that will be brought up might bring something up within you. So now that housekeeping stuff is out of the way, I'd like to again welcome everyone to Generation Indigenous' second event as part of the talking series, This Is My Story. My name is Taylor Bain-Takoza, and I'm again honored and humbled to be here talking in front of all of you and to introduce our wonderful speakers. I'm Dene. I come from the Fort Nelson First Nation in northeastern British Columbia, Treaty 8 territory. I've been a visitor here in Treaty 7 for the last 4 years as I work towards my degree in health and physical education at Mount Royal University. Our event today is called The Voices of Indigenous Women, a topic that is finally being brought to the forefront and becoming part of discussions in today's society. So today we have two incredible speakers, soon to be three, who will be touching on a variety of topics ranging from residential schools, missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls, and Two-Spirit. The truth of Indigenous women and the realities we face are finally being voiced by our own women and are being listened to by more than just our families. Gen I's mandate is to create better relations between Indigenous and non-Indigenous communities through different initiatives. Holding events like these is an important step in realizing and understanding the truth of colonial history, which is the first step in reconciliation. And I know that reconciliation is a hard concept right now to believe in for both Indigenous and non-Indigenous people here in Canada. With the recent verdicts that have been given in the past few months, it feels like we're back right where we started, Indigenous lives being seen as less. Truth and reconciliation. You see that truth comes before reconciliation, and that's how it should have been from the beginning. We must learn the truth and acknowledge it before we can move towards this idea of reconciliation. I personally love being part of Gen I because it allows me to believe that one day this idea of reconciliation can be a reality. And I hope through events like this that this can be a reality for you as well. So before I introduce our first speaker, I would like to take a moment to explain the importance of the red dress on the empty chair. Métis artist Jamie Black from Winnipeg created the Red Dress Project in 2014. It was an installation art project based on an aesthetic response to the critical national issue of missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls. Since the launch in 2014, the red dress has become a national symbol to represent the injustice and the violence that Indigenous women and girls face in this country. Did you know that Indigenous women and girls are almost 4 times more likely to experience violence than non-Indigenous women in Canada, yet we make up 1% of the population? In 2015, the RCMP revealed that they had 1,181 cases of missing and murdered Indigenous women in this country. Violence against Indigenous women and girls is an issue that should concern all of us as Canadians. The women and girls that should be sitting in that chair is your friends, is someone's mom, sister, auntie, niece, cousin. To honor the sisters who never returned home, we will take a moment of silence. Once again, I would like to thank you for coming, as showing up is the first and most impactful step to bettering our relationships. And as well, I'd just like to mention that if time does allow us, we will have a Q&A session at the end, where the audience can ask questions to our speakers and become part of an important conversation and to seek clarification and perspective. I am very happy and honored to welcome our first speaker of the afternoon, Eileen Black. Eileen is a Blackfoot elder from the Siksika Nation and sits on the board of directors for the Blackfoot Crossing Historical Park. Eileen is a proud grandmother of an ever-growing family, and she's an active member in Siksika. Eileen is a recognized and inspiring elder matriarch for her home community. Please help me in welcoming our first speaker, Eileen Black.
Good afternoon. Where do I start? My name is Eileen. My married name is Gauthier, and Black is my maiden name. However, when they were signing the treaty, my great-great-great-grandfather came up with his father to sign the treaty. When his father, when it was his turn to go, my great-great-grandfather told the persons that were doing the signing. My great-great-grandfather was 14 years old. He said his dad told him, his father said, he is a man, he's 14 years old, he's old enough to sign for himself. My great-grandfather at that time was, his Indian name, his Indigenous name, native name was Siksinam, meaning he was very dark. He was black, not a black person, but he was very dark. So his native name was Sixinam. When the translator, whoever they hired, spoke some Blackfoot, but not enough to properly interpret our language. So when my great-great-grandfather signed it as Sixinam, the interpreter said, his name is Black. His name is Black. He will be Black. That's where our name came from, Black. Our original name is Rabbit Carrier, and I'm from the Rabbit Carrier clan of Siksika. So that's where people often ask why I have the name Black, and I guess it's not our true name, but we've had it for so long, we just decided, we just kept it. Excuse me, at the beginning of this, I'm a little bit nervous. I'm not used to talking to a room full of people. I'm used to talking in circles, in a circle. That is our way of talking. We talk in a circle, and everything that we do is done in a circle. And so for me, I'm more comfortable in talking in a circle. Also, this is my story, and this is my story. I've always chose not to share it, not to talk about it, because it is my story, and I've chose to keep it to myself. However, I came forward to honor my grandson, who is one of the organizers for this, because of his interest, because of his input. He has a drive, my grandson, and I wanted to honor him. And I thought for us there's always a time to do things, and I guess to follow that journey. And I guess this is my. So this is my story. I grew up with my parents. My parents were a very, very strong, respected members of the Horn Society, a revered society in our Siksika culture. When they're in this culture, us in a community, you just know who they were, who those people belong in that society. They never went out and say, oh, I'm a Horn Society member. I belong to this, and you have to do this for me, and you have to, whatever. This is what I'm observing right now in some of the societies. I grew up in a very restricted home. My dad was 5 years old when he was put in the residential school. Consequently, he was brought up with a lot of discipline, strict discipline. Can you imagine a 5-year-old in a residential school? So growing up, that's what he learned, very strict discipline. Plus, belonging to the Horn Society, there was also strict discipline in there. He was a bundle holder. When you have a bundle in your home, you learn to respect that bundle. This bundle is an object representing Appisadoki. That was not Appisadoki, but that was Appisadoki's bundle. And when you lived in a home with a bundle, you had to learn. We were taught respect. In our house, we had to always be quiet. If we wanted to run around and play, you go outside and you do that. You go outside and you play. Outside, scream all you want, but never in the house. There was no running around in the house. There was no loud talking, loud laughing in the house because of that bundle in the house. My dad used to get up early in the morning and go outside to pray. My mother, however, sometimes she would join him, but sometimes she would just be getting breakfast ready. Because remember I said my dad was raised in a residential school, so breakfast had to be at 6 o'clock. Lunch had to be at noon, 12 noon sharp. And you had to be sitting there. If you were not sitting there, you didn't eat. That's how strict that residential school upbringing to my dad. So here I am being brought up in two cultures, the Horn Society way and the residential school discipline. But all in all, I think learning from that, yes, it did us a lot of, we were brought up with a lot of mixture happening up there and there. And eventually we grew up that way. Eventually there came a time that my father started drinking. And he let the bundle go, gave it to somebody else that could take care of it, because that was part of the ways. If you could not, you had to live a certain way of life to have a bundle in your house. So if he was not being respectful to that bundle, then he made the decision to let it go. And there started his drinking. My dad didn't always drink. He didn't always drink, but he had binges. If any one of you have ever worked with anyone with problems like that, you know what I mean by binges. My dad learned a lot from the non-natives because he went out there to farm, to help with their farming. He was a hired hand. He brought a lot of the non-native ways into our home. We adopted the cooking, that spices, stuff like that we never had before. So these kind of ways were brought into our life. Eventually, for me, I started in residential school. I must have been about 6 or 7 when I was sent to residential school. I know my dad was very strict, and he was pretty hard. He was a pretty hard man to, it's almost like you had to say, oh, Sergeant, we're doing okay, or whatever you have to, he was very strict. On the other hand, my mother was a very kind, warm person. I don't recall either parents ever having been spanked or hit in any way. Yes, my dad was very strict, but I was never hit or spanked. Or if there was discipline, you had to go do some chore, you had to go do something to get punished, but I was never spanked. Thank God for that. The first time I felt was a strap in residential school. And the strap that they used was not the belts that people are using. It was some other kind of thick belt. They call it a belt, but it was a strap thing that they would strap us with. Luckily, I never got it on the bum, but I got it on the head, and it really hurts. So my parents too, their marriage was an arranged marriage. It was recognized by the society, by the elder members. The parents got together to arrange the marriage. My parents never knew each other before they were brought together. So my dad, being brought up in the residential school, was baptized a Catholic. My mother, on the other hand, lived at that time there was a division on Siksika. You had the East End people
West End people. We were the West End people, went to the Anglican Church, the East End went to the Catholic Church, and they had the Catholic St. Joseph Residential School, and the Old Sun Residential School was in the West. So my mother was from the Anglican side. She was brought up Anglican. But when the marriage was arranged, my dad had to move up to where my mother's dwelling was, because in the arranged marriage, the husband-to-be takes over the farmland, whatever belongs to his future in-laws. So he moved up west. And because of that, he joined my mother in going to the Anglican church. We went to church every Sunday. Every Sunday, you talk about the community. We had community spirit. We had a community gathering. The people were very close. The people helped each other. They helped each other out. After church every Sunday, we would go to the river, by the river, have like a community picnic. It was also the time, some of those times were the season to gather berries for winter or whatever, or for the ceremonies that would be happening. Or most of the time it was cutting wood, because we still had wood stoves at that time. So it was a big fun gathering for us that happened. However, down the road, and I went to the residential school as a young girl. The Anglican residential school was good. I didn't experience any of what I experienced in the other school. So my dad, because he was raised up in the residential school, the Catholic residential school, the priests started coming up to the house and hounding my dad. You don't belong to the Anglican church. You don't belong to this community. You are a Catholic, and you're living in sin. You're living in sin because they were not married by the church. They didn't understand that to us, our way, this was our culture. This was our cultural way of living those arranged marriage. They were blessed in some ways by the other elders, but not they didn't recognize that. So eventually, because of the hound that they kept coming, finally my dad agreed to get them out of his hair, that yes, okay, we'll get married by the Catholic Church. And I think he must have thought everything was going to stay the way it is, but it didn't. Once they got married by the Catholic Church, we, as the kids, had to go to the Catholic school. Now remember, I talked about that division, kind of a segregation. I like to call it my word. Okay, when we from the Anglican community went down to the Catholic Church, that is when my dilemmas started. That's when my morals in residential school started. That's when the bullying started for me. That's when I started to fear God. That's when I started to fear God, and I used to think, if this is God, why is this happening to me? Why is this happening to me? He's the big honcho in the Catholic Church. I remember when I first went down to the school there, and when we were in the Anglican school, we did day school, or we stayed there sometimes. It was up to my parents if they wanted to leave us there, or he he would. We lived only a mile from the school, so it was his decision if we should go and stay at home day school. But in the Catholic Church, you had to be there. You had to stay there in residence, and anyways. So I remember when I first went there, we had to be baptized into the Catholic religion, and so you had to have catechism class. And I remember this teacher. Her name was Miss Poirier. I'll never forget her. I can still picture her, how she looked. She was tall, she had dark hair, short hair. She had what kids today would describe a witch nose. That's how she looked to me. And I remember her pointing her finger at me one time, right at my nose, telling me if I did not study to be the catechism, that I would go to hell. Now, you just need to hear that 2 or 3 times, and you say, no, because by then I knew about hell. Who wants to go to hell? This church isn't supposed to teach us kindness, isn't it supposed to teach us love? And here they're telling me if I don't do this, I'm going to go to hell. Well, okay, I don't want to go to hell, so I was already very divine at that time. I always had to my way. I think it got me into trouble a lot of times throughout school because I would resist. I always resisted, and so eventually, I succumbed to them. I became a Catholic, but little did I know that by accepting that I was in hell already. I was in hell through the Crowfoot St. Joseph residential school years. I was in hell. Right now when I think about it, I think, how did I survive? How did I survive all of that? And I know that I survived because of the love that I got from my mother and my father. That's why I survived. It was not because of the nuns, the priests, the teachers, the very mean, ugly people. Very mean, ugly people. I cannot even today to point, no, this one was okay, this one was good. Very mean, ugly people that I came across. Now I read about books. I'll read and let's say I'm not alone. Some had it worse than I did. Some. When you've gone through something like that, they strip you of something, but I don't know what it is. They strip you of something, some kind of feeling, they take something away from you. And you know what, you don't get it back overnight. It doesn't happen overnight. It takes years to get yourself back up on your feet. I became an alcoholic. I think that was something that I didn't plan. All of a sudden, one day, I just realized, hey, what the heck am I, what the heck is happening to me? Why am I like this? Why am I, almost a street drunk? Why am I hanging around St. Regis, Calgarian, all these places? Why am I here? That's not the way I was brought up. That was not the way I was brought up with my culture, the Horn Society way. Not that I belong to it, but what I've forgotten about that way of life from my parents because of the residential school. That's what was taken away then. They did, but they didn't. They tried and they succeeded because, yes, I was a lost soul for I don't know how many years before I decided to change, because there was the one thing that my dad always told us is for us to follow Napigoiks, their way of life. You learn from Napigoiks. You go to school. You teach yourself. You follow their ways, because that is the only way you're going to beat them. And I know that I have, not in a negative way, but I know I have come to be where I am, at peace with myself, with people around me. I became an alcoholic. That's why I know the Serenity Prayer. The Serenity Prayer was my saving grace. Being an alcoholic was things that happened to us in our lives, and mine was from the residential school. It was not my upbringing. It was not because of, we had a good life. We had a good life. I learned a lot about my people, about how we live. Yes, we forgot about it. I forgot about it as I was growing up and living, out of the bottle. That's the one of the things that I don't talk about my drinking to glorify it. I don't talk about that to glorify it, because that is not a way of life for anybody. But I talk about it to tell myself, you learned from it, and now you're just giving back what was given to you. Somebody along the way helped me to find myself. And I advocate for a lot of, I went to school, and I was going to be the first Native police woman here in Calgary. And you know why I didn't become that? Because the bottle. I went to Mount Royal. As an alcoholic, I completed my course. I took criminal justice because I wanted to help. But from what I knew about back home, I wanted to help a lot of our young people stay out of jail, because I also had cousins, nephews, nieces that were ending up in jail, ending up in trouble, and I wanted to help them. I thought, oh, here, I'm going to be a savior for them. I completed my course. I'm very proud to show my diploma and my marks. I was honor student for 3 years, and I was on the president for 3 years. My 2-year course turned into 3 years because of my drinking, but I succeeded. I did my practicum at the Salvation Army Children's Village, and there they had one of the homes were for the youth up to 16. That's when I realized I don't want to work with these kids. They're bad. They're super bad. They're scary because they come and punch you and hit you, and you know, they were really bad kids. That's when I thought, what the heck? Why did I take this course? I did a few months at the Spy Hill jail, but I didn't like. It was too scared. It was too scary. And me, of all person, a drunk, being scared of the jail, and so I didn't last there. Then my drinking progressed, but at the time that I decided to quit drinking, one of my nephews had already sobered up. and he was working at the Crowfoot Sunrise Treatment Center. And there they needed a night attendant. And that was just about the time that I just had thought I was going to go back drinking, because I was this close to really wanting to drink. One of the reasons that kept me sober too was not just the program, was my children. With my children, I said, I wanted these kids. I wanted these children. Why am I treating them that way? Why am I treating them that way when they deserve so much more and better? And that's one of the reasons why I stayed sober. Consequently, I started working as a night attendant at the Crowfoot Sunrise Treatment Center. I quickly made it up the ladder. When I retired from there, 22 years later, I was the house manager for the Sunrise Treatment Center. And by then, I knew I needed a change, and I wanted to leave the city. And by then, they had built a new Sunrise Treatment Center up on 32nd Avenue. And so I retired, and I moved back home to my reserve. I moved back there because I wanted to get away from the city. I just wanted to leave the city. After about 2 years, I didn't know if I had made a good choice in the move, but I started doing volunteer work around Siksika. And it was there that there was an opening at the local addiction, NADAP addiction services. And they asked me to apply, but I hadn't wanted to go back to work, but I kind of was hounded, but I agreed. Okay, I'll apply, and I got it. I worked there for another 12 years. I just recently retired last September. But I've kept myself busy by continuing to study our way of life, continue to talk about not only our way of life, but about the addiction. And right now, I'm also working with the shelter that they've got started in Siksika. My life has always been about helping my people. That's why I said at the beginning, I don't do this. I don't do it to bring attention to myself, because that's not what I want. All I want to do is to help my people, because my people are people. My people need people like me who have gone through hell and who know how to come out of there. The other hell was my drinking. The other hell is people that constantly trying to pull you down. But I'm a survivor. At one of the conferences we're doing, I said my name is, I'm a survivor of 3 residential schools. I'm a survivor of the Anglican school. I'm a survivor of Crowfoot Residential School. I'm a survivor of the Ermineskin Residential School, because I was so bullied and treated bad in Crowfoot School that they had to get me out of there, and they sent me up north. In some ways, it was better there, because I was looked after by the nuns. They looked after me. They protected me. But again, it's bullying. Bullying from all kinds of people, from all whatever ways they do it, is the most evil to live through. Bullying. How many people you know of have committed suicide because of bullying. So when I said at that conference that I was a survivor, this young gentleman told me, "No, you're not a survivor." And he pointed at me and he said, "You're a warrior. You're a warrior." And little did he know how much he gave me a lift, another one that I needed. That I am a warrior. We as Indigenous people are warriors. Every single one of us are warriors, because look at what we have to face. Discrimination, prejudice, people always looking to judge us. I guess that's why I always feel that the Creator works in a mysterious way. He knows what, slowly but surely. That's why you people are in here. That's why all of you are in here, to carry this message to whoever, your youngest children, your youngest child. Teach them. Abstuduki gave it to us to love one another. Abstuduki didn't tell me, "Sitiman, just love her because she's like your same color skin. That's the only person you love, Sitiman." He didn't tell me that. He said, "Love everyone, no matter what color." I didn't grow up with colors in my upbringing. There was no colors in my upbringing. It was only when I went to residential school that I started learning about colors. My growing up here, my native culture never showed us as youngsters colors. They taught us spirituality, that way of life. We never knew about colors. And so it's really sad now that we people look at each other in colors. And we shouldn't have to do that. I've been very fortunate to have a lot of non-native people in my life. And I always tell them, you are the people that makes the difference with us, like with me, with my family, with my grandchildren. Because you look at us just like, you just look at us like we're people. In my family, we're sometimes like the United Nations people, hey? Because of the people that we have in our lives. So I'll just give that to you. It's in your hands. That's why you're here today. That's why you're here today. And as Native elders, we're kind of all over the world. We're kind of all over the place. Sometimes I feel I never finish my story, but that's okay. That's okay. That's me. Yeah, that's me. And so I thank you for listening. And I give it to you to give back. In my sobriety, that's what I'm doing. I'm giving back to people that have helped me along the way. And I don't wish what we went through upon your lives. I wish you peace. I wish you serenity. I wish you a lot of love. Above all, I guess respect. Respect yourself. Respect yourself. As long as you respect yourself, you're also respecting Abstuduki. That's what he wants. I really believe in prayers. I believe in prayers, and I know they work. Again, I don't think I'm out of breath. I need a cup of tea.
thank you, Eileen, for sharing your story with us. I know at times it isn't easy, but know that it's making an impact, and it's gonna, in your grandson's life, we see his journey is definitely gonna better the future for him. So thank you. Our next speaker is Kelly Morningbull. Kelly is from the Piikani Nation and is currently the Library Experience Facilitator at the Calgary Public Library, but up until recently was the Student Success Coordinator for the Niskin Center at Mount Royal University. Kelly is very active here in the city of Calgary as she dedicates time to the Walking with Our Sisters campaign and other Indigenous commitments across the city. Please help me in welcoming our second speaker, Kelly Morningbull.
Huki ni sukuats, ni dana go bugaki. Hello, my relatives. My name is Kelly Morningbull. My Blackfoot name is Little Woman, and it was given to me by my great aunt Ida Yellowhorn, who's also from Piikani First Nation. And I guess the irony of that was she was like 6'2", and so I think she thought that I was going to be a little woman, so she passed down her name to me, and I've been carrying it ever since I was a baby. And but before I start, I just wanted to thank Eileen for the prayer to begin this series. As Indigenous people, we always begin things with a prayer to ask for good things. And as I was speaking to my mother this morning, she reminded me of that, you know, putting out tobacco, putting out, you know, smudging, before I came here, and just so that I can say the right things, and that you know, the words that come out of my mouth are positive, and that people I guess can take something away from it. I didn't really plan too much on what I was going to say. I've been kind of formulating a story in my head around what exactly that I wanted to say, and so I guess I'll just start with, I grew up in Piikani, which is about 2.5 hours south from here. I was born and raised. I went to school at Pincher Creek, and by the time I left high school, I was 7 months pregnant with my son, Kobe, and Kobe saved my life. I was kind of going down a path where, you know, drugs, alcohol, were playing a huge part in my life, and it was strange because I didn't grow up around alcohol, I didn't grow up around drugs, I didn't, you know, I grew up around ceremony, and that played a huge part in how I live my life today, and how I use prayer and ceremony as a guidance to wherever I'm going or whatever place I'm going to be stepping into. I always rely on that, and it keeps me going, and I try to pass it down to my son, Kobe, who has been here since he was 5, so he's very urbanized, and I try to keep him, you know, his culture, our culture instilled in his life so that he can, you know, use it as a tool to survive and to be proud. I first learned about residential school when I was 24 years old. My parents never told me about residential school. They never told me about the 60 scoop. They never told me anything. And so when I went to post-secondary, I was in the state program for radio, television, broadcast news, and we were watching a film called The Canary Effect. And I didn't know what it was about. I just sat down, and I was with my 30 other classmates who were all non-Indigenous, and we were watching this film, and I saw my life in the film, and everything kind of just made sense, you know, with my uncles and my aunts and the alcohol abuse and the drug abuse and the suicides and all of that. I was 17 when my first cousin committed suicide. He was 16, and it was really traumatizing for me, and I think for anyone, when you have a person that you're really close to pass away suddenly, and never really understood why. And then it happened again when I was 20, and then 21, and then my uncle was murdered when I was 22. And so it was just this really dark path for a while, but my son had come into my life, and he changed my life around in the sense that when I was pregnant, all I kept thinking about was, I don't want to be another statistic. I don't want to be another teen mom who does, nothing. And I want to raise my son the same way that my parents had raised me, and, providing opportunities. And, one of the greatest things that my mother ever did for me when I first started post-secondary was she said, be whatever you want to be. You could do whatever you want to do. And she didn't create boundaries for me. And so when she had said that, a whole world had opened up. And I had dreams of, doing all of these things. And I used writing a lot as an outlet. And I wrote poetry, and I wrote stories. And when my son was born, I wrote children's stories for him. And for some reason, I always wrote about animals, and like dogs and foxes and things like that. And I would read them to him, and I still have some of them. Fortunately, a lot of the stuff that I had were lost in a flood like 15 years ago. So I don't have a lot of just like memorabilia to remind me of my son and I in our first stages of our journey. So when I was about 22, 23, I moved to Calgary. I moved to Calgary to be a nanny for my sister. I had just completed academic upgrading at a satellite campus, and I moved here. I had no intentions of moving here. I never really even liked Calgary. I thought it was the most boring city. There's not a whole lot of things for Indigenous people to do in the city, but I just needed to go somewhere. I just needed to remove myself from the reserve and find these opportunities. And so I moved here, and within 3 months I realized I don't want to be a nanny. I don't even really like kids. I do now, I love kids, they're amazing. But having a child, a young child at a young age, I felt really restricted in the things that I can do for myself. And I couldn't do a lot of traveling, I couldn't, going to school was really hard because I was a single parent at the time. And so I faced a lot of challenges, and I just kept pushing forward. And, so we moved to the city, and I started a job with, it was called the Urban Indigenous Aboriginal Strategy Program with Western Economic Diversification. And I was an intern, and that kind of gave me my first glimpse into what opportunities had provided Indigenous people in the city. And there wasn't a whole lot, and that was really disappointing. And I couldn't take my son to programs. There was always like this age restriction where it was like 12 and up, and I'm like, there's no programs for him. So we didn't have a lot of opportunities, so we just kind of did our own thing. And as I started to, the more I lived in the city, the more I found out about my own history and my own family. And my father is from Siksika, and he is from the McHugh Water Chief side. And I also come from a line of chiefs on both sides of my family. And so my parents always tell me that's where my strength comes from. My resilience is because of my ancestors and my previous grandparents. And so I guess it played a lot in my confidence in saying, well, my grandparents have done so much in the city, building the city, that I want to give back too. I want to create a legacy for my son and for my grandchildren. And, so when they're researching me, and hopefully they know me, my grandchildren, when I have them, not yet, but my son's 16, so I hope he doesn't follow my path. And so he, on my dad's side, when I started working at the Friendship Center, they wanted me to create this 50 years of friendship. And so I started to do all this history with the Friendship Center, and I saw these pictures in the newspaper, and I was like, that man really looks like my dad. And he had a headdress on, and there was like other chiefs, and so as I was reading the news article, it was actually my great-grandfather, Clarence Sr., and I got really excited, and I was like, it was, really amazing to see something, like to see my own history in, Calgary. And so, and I kind of just left it for a while, and I showed it to my parents, and I took photocopies, and I kind of just stopped my researching on my dad's side. But now that I that I work in the Calgary Public Library, I have access to all these books. So I've been spending a lot of my lunch hour just in the collections and researching where my family actually comes from, because I don't really know where my family comes from. I know of pieces, and but I want to know more, because that's really important to me. Those are my roots, and that's who I am as a First Nations woman, specifically Blackfoot. And yeah, so it's just been, in the last 5 years, as they had mentioned, I was working with Mount Royal University, and it was kind of weird. I was landscaping, so I was done school, and I was landscaping, and I didn't want to be an adult, and I didn't want to get a job. I didn't believe in job security. I just moved from job to job to job, as a lot of Indigenous people do. And as along people in my generation, we do that a lot. We don't stay in one job for a long time. We're constantly moving. And so I had started at the university through, I was the receptionist. And I did it because I'm also a filmmaker. So I wanted to find a job that was easy, that I could write when I'm at the office, when I'm not doing anything. And within 2 months, I was promoted to the student success coordinator. And my life changed when I took on that job, and I learned a lot about myself, and I learned to, I wanted to give the students at the university the same kind of support that I was given when I was in school. And I utilized a lot of the Indigenous services, and if those services weren't there, I would have never succeeded. I would have just left, and I would have just walked away and said, I give up, I'm moving on, and go find another job. But when I was landscaping, so I'm jumping all over the place. When I was landscaping, I was fighting with my boss. My boss really took advantage of me, and I was always in trouble for stuff. And it just got really, really draining, to the point where it's like, I can't do this anymore. Like, it's affecting my mental health, it's affecting the way that I feel all the time. And I just don't want to go to work, but I need to work because I need to pay for my rent and all of these things. And, so we were driving, we're on Métis Trail, we're driving, and we were both just screaming at each other. And we were driving to the site, and I had a thought that I'm gonna just jump out of this car. And wherever I land, we're going like 80 kilometers down the highway. That's like super dangerous. And I grabbed the door handle, and then I had to stop myself and say, no, like, this is stupid, you're being stupid. And so I just sat there, I just got really, really quiet, and said, I'm not gonna talk to you right now. And I just turned the other way. I got to the job site, and I was smoking at the time, and so I was having a cigarette, and I took out a piece of some tobacco, and I prayed with it, and I was like in this garden, and I was like praying, and I prayed to Creator, and I said, I need change. I really need to change. I need something. Like, I can't do this anymore. And I was like crying, and I was like digging in the dirt and like all this stuff. And finally I had, I put the tobacco down, and we did our job. We're moving to the next site, and my sister texted me. Or I went on Facebook, and I was like, does anybody have like leads on jobs? I need a new job. I can't work at this job, da 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 da. And then like 3 hours had passed. Nobody had said anything on Facebook. So then again, I'm like pissed off, because I'm like, nobody even cares about me. I'm like, stupid people, and like And I was just like, I was like in my moment, but because I was so miserable, that's, what my mindset was like. And so, so we're going to the next site, and my sister had messaged me, and she said, hey, apply for this job at Mount Royal. The deadline is today at midnight. And I was like, okay. And so I took that as a sign. And and then I got home, I got on my computer, and then I went on Facebook, and still nothing. Nobody had said anything, and I was so angry. And then I realized that I had published a private posting, and so nobody saw it. And so I was just like laughing at myself, and then, so then I applied for the job, and I ended up getting the job. And so I, started working with the students, and it was amazing. It was amazing for a really long time until it wasn't. And I recently left, so I've been here at the Calgary Public Library for tomorrow's my 4th week, and I love it. It's a change, different pace. Working at the university and working with the students, it's really draining. And so I have education in television and communications, but I was actually being a social worker. And when my mom told me I can be anything, that was the one thing she told me: you're not going to be a social worker. and my mom does the exact same thing in Pincher Creek. So we were, so we would talk a lot and digress all the time. And it was, comforting knowing that we understood each other. And so we, would always just chat on the phone. But it got really draining. Working for our people is extremely draining. They deal with a lot of stuff, intergenerational trauma, residential school survivors, and you have to help them navigate this stuff. And sometimes when you tell them no, they get extremely angry with you and they take it out on you. And so some of the students were just like really beat me down to the point where I was being bullied. I was being bullied by students, and I didn't know what to do. I really didn't know what to do, and I wanted to be there for them, and I wanted to, I believe in tough love. I am someone who, thinks that no is sometimes the kindest word that you can tell an individual. I don't believe in enabling people. My parents never did it for me. My friend, when I worked with WED, she was my tough love. She was the one that always told me no, and I'd get so angry with her. And we'd fight all the time, and we would, she would always tell me, she was like, you need to go to counseling. I'm like, I don't. And then I went, and I was like, you're right. And then, and then she was like, you gotta go to school, Kelly. And I was like, I don't. But then she was right, so I went. And so, and I still rely on her. Even when I decided to move jobs, I called her. She lives in Ottawa now. And I called her and I said, hey, I want to do this, change my job. What do you think? And, and I was kind of telling her what I was going through. And she said, do it. You have the power to change your own life. And you have to sometimes take chances. And it was really hard for me to leave the university because I had developed these wonderful, awesome friendships with the staff, with the faculty, with students, and and it was like a big family. And so when I left, I felt like I left my family behind. And so now I'm here, and it's a little bit, it's really different. I work with all non-Indigenous people, but it's to me it's no different. It's just it's another workspace. I'm used to it. I don't, discriminate against anything, and I just try to, do the right thing. And as Eileen had said, the things that I do in my life are for my people. And as Indigenous people, we always think in generations. We always think ahead. We're always thinking, and that's my mindset is what am I going to do now that it's going to be better for the next generation? And so when I think of that, I think of my son and how his life should be a little bit more easier. And they always say that the 8th generation is the one that's going to be the super shining stars. And I believe it. I really, really believe it. And I, when I had watched that film and I watched, I was traumatized by it. but everything made sense. And so my son was 4 and he's on the couch, 4 or 5, and I'm trying to talk to him about residential school, and he had like no concept. But he did, he understood. And by the time he was 8, we were sitting there and we're eating breakfast, and he said, "Mom, I am the luckiest person in the world." And I said, "Oh yeah, why is that?" And he said, "Well, my name's Kobe, nobody has a name like me, that's pretty awesome." He's like, "I'm a left-handed person, left-handed people are really special." And he was like, "And I'm First Nations." He was like, "We are the luckiest people in the world." He's like, "I am so proud to be Blackfoot." And I was just like, wow. I'm like, to me that was amazing, because I was never proud of who I was. I was always ashamed of the color of my skin, the color of my eyes, my culture, until I was like 26. My last name's Morningbull, so I mean, I got teased a lot. And it wasn't until I understood, the systemic racism that Indigenous people face, that it's not my fault that I felt these ways, but I have to change that. And I can't always feel sorry for myself and say, blaming people. I'm like, okay, so what am I gonna do to change the situation? Even if it's just my situation, what am I gonna do? And so, as part of that legacy piece, I work with Calgary's development, helping them to develop their strategic policy planning. I work with Making Treaty 7. I think it's a story that needs to be told. And, I've been with M Media Production Society Gallery for the last 5 years as a board member, instilling Indigenous programs for our Indigenous artists, because, like I said, there was nothing for a long time. And so having to create these paths, and they take time, And so for any Indigenous people here, things are gonna take time, anybody. But it will get there, if we just work together, and have a open heart and be kind, and that's another thing that I tell my son, you be kind to people, and you don't talk bad about people. And, sometimes, the homeless people, I'm like, they have issues, they're dealing with stuff that we don't understand, but if you can have an understanding of, a little bit of understanding of what they're going through, it'll just, the world will become a kinder place when we understand one another and our culture and our differences, and celebrating those differences and sharing and moving forward. So, with that's just part of my story. I was a little bit all over the place, but I think you got the gist of it. And thank you.
Thank you, Kelly, for sharing your story. That was so impactful. I just want to share something with you. When I first came to Calgary in 2014, fresh out of high school, so my reserve was about 16 hours from here. I remember talking to my mom a few weeks into school, and I was telling her, Mom, I do not want to be a statistic. I remember crying to her and was so scared to be in a city, no family close to me, and I know that you really helped me in staying here and making sure I wasn't one of those statistics, so thank you for that. And sharing your story, you not only inspired me, but I know that your story is one that needs to be heard. And so thank you for sharing. So we're going to take a 5-minute break. We have to set up for our next speaker. So we will reconvene at 3:40 maybe. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to start with our final speaker for the afternoon. So Danny Black is a two-spirit Blackfoot artist living on Treaty 7 territory. She's the creator of the Treaty 7 Film Collective and recently won the Shine Award through the Southern Alberta Indigenous Youth Awards for her LGBTQ2S+ activism in the community. She currently works at the Forest Lawn Public Library and is applying for justice studies with a specialization with at-risk youth. So please help me in welcoming our last speaker, Danny Black.
Hi y'all, so I'm just gonna adjust this mic right here. I am going to turn the lights off, so I'll give you 10 seconds to get to your seat safely before the lights get off, okay? I'm sorry. Okay, so you're not going to see me. I'm going to be the mysterious voice. You know? Okay, so it's a good thing I got a nice voice. So, but I did buy a dress for you guys. I hope you got to see that before I turn the lights off. So, thank you. Okay. All right. I'm done with the jokes. Okay, so Oki, Mokinsis, and Treaty 7. I think I just butchered that word, but I'm learning Blackfoot, which is like a lot of what I do. So I'm going to talk a little bit about myself, but this is going to be a very visual presentation. It's kind of like school. I also like hanging out in dark rooms with screens and stuff, so, you know, I'm a filmmaker, so I mean, it's only natural, but okay, so my name is Wahoki Nista Nidanago Sudaki Ni Siksagaki Nitsitopi Mokinsis. So, hello. Actually, I feel like the new rule in this city is when somebody's speaking their Indigenous language and they're finished, everybody should just cheer. Like, just be, yeah! You know what? Because, like, we are doing so much work to try and revive our languages. And, like, you know, it's a beautiful thing. It really is. So there you go. You guys, starting today, we do that every time someone speaks their language. All right, so just a little bit about me so you guys know who I am and you're like, who's this person? Why did they ask her to talk about stuff? So I just wanted to let you guys know a little bit about me. So last year I went to the Adam Beach Film Institute and I took the Enhanced Filmmaking and Skills and Techniques course. So if any of you are Indigenous and are interested in filmmaking from an Indigenous perspective, please go. Living in Winnipeg was incredible. I really suggest that everybody goes there. It's often described as the urban res, but it's such a beautiful city. It's such a strong city, such a passionate city. So if you have the chance, don't listen to what anybody says. That city is beautiful. I am also the member of the Vision Keepers Council. So our objective is to get somehow figuring it out the Anglican Church to take accountability and also to adopt the TRC's 94 calls to action, as well as the UN's Declaration of Rights for Indigenous People. So we're currently working on that. I also curated the last year's Alternative, and so I called it a celebration of Two-Spirit and Indigenous queers through film and performance. Did any of you go? Did anybody go? A couple people went. It was great. If you didn't go, maybe you can do maybe next time. But it was a night that I really wanted to make sure that Indigenous people, Two-Spirit folk were really celebrated in this city, because I feel like, and a lot about my talk is going to be sort of how history and colonization has attempted to erase us and eradicate us, and that's not going to happen. So that's an event that I wanted to showcase just our beauty, our talent, our creativity, our film work, and our performance, and our poetry and our music. So if you went, I hope you liked it. And then I was also the recipient of the Shine Award through the Southern Alberta Indigenous Youth Awards, which was created by Michelle Thrush. The Shine Award was specifically for LGBTQ and Two-Spirit advocacy within the community, and it was the community that nominated me, so that was a huge, huge honor. I often joke about it. I say that me and my Blackfoot legs got nominated because I ended up wearing this like really short skirt. It's kind of like today, you know, it's a thing, but like Blackfoot legs, right? But that was great. And also, I was a part of the Indigenous Artist Residency through the city of Calgary. And my research was to figure out how we got to this point. I wanted to talk to people who always grown up or had moved to urban settings and are reconnecting to culture through the introduction of language. So that was something that was really, really interesting to me, and I got to talk to a lot of people, and through that, now I'm working on an installation at the city, the downtown, the Center Street train station, and I'm calling it The Revitalization is Real. Last weekend, me and Jackie Gallos Acunas, did I totally butcher your name? I'm so sorry. We took some photos of 22 youth last weekend, and a lot of my work is to really showcase our strength and our resiliency, and I wanted to kind of in a way break stereotypes by having these amazing, beautiful portraits of our youth just looking confident and happy, and they're doing some really badass stuff here, and I really wanted to showcase all the things that they're doing, because I think that the youth, the women and Two-Spirit are going to be the leaders of the revolution. So I hope that you guys all get a chance to see that when that is up. Hopefully that will be soon, but just trying to figure out some logistics, but I think that's really exciting. So it's really cool to have all these portraits in downtown Calgary, am I right? I'm also the creator of the Treaty 7 Film Collective, and that was extended from Winnipeg through Roger Boyer, Got a Blessing, and it is something that is being run by 4 women of color. And here's our little bio right here. Here's some beautiful logos that we just got. And if you guys are interested, we have Instagram, and we also have Facebook. We also have a Twitter, but I have no idea how to use Twitter, so give me some time to figure that out. But yeah, we have a lot of things coming up. one of the things is Broadcast Lab through Arts Commons. They asked us to curate some films. So we did a call out to our community and we got some shorts, and the theme is archives and reflection. So if you're ever in Arts Commons this summer, it'll be during the same time as my installation. Check them all out in one day. They're walking distance, so it's gonna be really cool. So I'm gonna turn these lights off. I'm just gonna quickly show you guys a short film. So this is a short film that this is the Film Collective's first film. This was also through the Herland Video Mentorship, and if it comes on again, I really encourage the women, the non-binary, and the girls and trans to come and to apply for this. So it's women teaching about how to do filmmaking. This is including a lot of urban Indigenous folk. I really wanted to showcase them, but I also wrote an open letter to a child that may or may not be coming in the future. It was a way for me to reconcile my own sort of question fertility. But also I just wanted it something to be like a way that our kids, if they watch this, are not completely blindsided about our history, because just like Kelly, it took me until I was like 22 to actually hear the word colonization. It took me years to understand like how residential school had affected us and even what intergenerational trauma is. So I wanted to write something to just, again, so that people know that our youth know. So. You guys, the microphone. Okay, I'm black, so I don't need a black or like a microphone, but yeah, this will be okay. So yeah, this will be showing at the BAM Center as well. So check that out if you're in BAM. I just dropped the microphone. I also sometimes forget to breathe while I'm talking, so if I sound breathy or like I was just running, that's why. So it's kind of it, but okay. So I'm gonna show the film. Okay. And gets a gap. We haven't met yet, but I'm learning Blackfoot for you. My first words were Oki and Gitsigakaman. I think that is a good start for us. I don't know what your name is yet, but I know that you will have two of them. One will be what people call you, and the other will describe who you are. My name is Sudaki, rain woman, but I wait for the day when I hear you call me Na'a. Our ancestors left a path for us. I stand here hopeful that they are proud of me and that I continue to feel them in the presence as I take this journey learning as much as I can for you. I stand here strong knowing things will be different. I have so much to tell you. I don't know if you can hear me, but deep down, I know you're listening. I have a story for you. A story that neither has a beginning nor an ending, what is undeniably real. It is colored by my dreams, where I take us back to a time that we never experienced, but will always miss. I realize I cannot protect you from knowing the truth about our history, but I have to tell you with honesty. In this life, a heartbeat is the last sound you will hear before you enter, and a woman is the first thing you'll feel. It will be bright. Don't be afraid. You have waited long enough. You will be ready. When we are finally face to face, we will share a moment. In that moment, you will feel protected and loved. Know you will be taken care of, not just by me, but by your people. I will look down at you in my hands, and as you grow, I will be reminded of how many people have fought for you to be here, and I honor them for that. For every braid that was cut off, there was another one growing again. For every Blackfoot word that was punished, another one was remembered. For every time a ceremony was banned, your people took it underground to make sure we didn't lose the things that root us, guides us, sustains us. When the time comes, you will protect your people too. Together, we will continue the teachings of our ancestors. But you will grow up in the city, different from their ways. Your life within it will sometimes feel confined, but remember, the land and water beneath the city is yours. As you begin to learn our culture, you will feel the connections when you speak your language, when your feet no longer touch the pavement, and you discover the knowledge written into the land. I want you to know where you come from, and every person who has brought you here. I will help you by telling you every story that was given to me. It will remind you that the strength of our family and ancestors runs through your veins. You are an Itsitapi, and your life will be spent discovering the power within that. As you begin your journey, your spirit will be there to guide you. I will bring you to meet me here in this world, trusting your strength, potential, and capability. Wherever the path our ancestors laid down for you goes, remember, it always feels good to come back home, back to your people. Check, check, check. Thank you. Can you guys see the screen okay? Be honest. Okay, there we go. Check, check, check. All right, can you guys see the screen well? You're not lying, you promise? Okay. All right, so I think that it is very, very important to mention a couple of things. When I woke up this morning, I remember thinking, it's not like the old days. And I think that means a couple of things. I think that that's a good thing for a lot of different reasons, especially if you look at our history. But as Indigenous people in our communities, I don't think that that is something that's necessarily good. I think that there's a lot of things that we need to do to try and go back to a time that our ancestors would be very proud of. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So I'm gonna check. I think it's also very, very, very important to stop forgetting the gays. Stop forgetting the gays. Stop forgetting the gays. Can you guys say this with me? 1, 2, 3. Stop forgetting the gays. Please and thank you. Please and thank you. A lot of my talk is going to be about this because, again, we've had a history where the books, colonization, the Europeans, the settlers have really tried to erase who we are as people, and not only just in our community, but the different communities within our community. We were not eradicated. We were not erased. We are not loose morals. We are powerful and we are needed. For me, I think that as a young, I identify as an Indigenous queer. I am exploring what Two-Spirit means to me, but these are things that I constantly need to remind myself is that we weren't eradicated, we're still here. There's a quote that I heard, and I can't remember, and maybe somebody can remind me, but it's something the lines of, and I heard this in Vancouver at a talk at a panel that I was at, and it was something the lines of, they tried to bury us, but they didn't realize that we were seeds. And that's something that I think always sticks with me in the back of my mind, especially as I'm on this journey, because it can get tough, it can get hard, it can be difficult, but that's why I always rely on my community, on my family, and my other Two-Spirit and Indigenous queer brothers and sisters and others. So I think it's just really important to remember. We were not eradicated, we were not erased, we're still here, we are not loose morals. And that's something that I've heard older people within my community tell me is that LGBTQIA plus and Two-Spirit people, it's something that just came up in the 70s because of loose morals, and that's not true. That we as Two-Spirit were very much a part of our community, just like the people, within our community we had different roles. And I think that right now in Western society, the people who are being left out without having a voice are the youth, the women, the elders, and the Two-Spirit. So I just wanted to reiterate that this isn't something that just popped up out of nowhere. We've been here for a long time. We've been here since millennia. And we are powerful and we are needed. We need you here. And that's something that is a part of a campaign that was recently done, and it said that, we need you here. And it was about suicide prevention, specifically in our Two-Spirit community. We are not folk of the past. I think that this is something that probably all the Indigenous people have said out of their mouth in this room, and I think that this is something that also needs to be reminded to us that Two-Spirit folk are not a people of the past, that we're still here and that we're fighting to be a part of the community. If you look at Blackfoot Territory, Treaty 7, there's even been instances where there's been powwows that Two-Spirit have tried to dance in, and that's something that's really medicinal for us, but have been physically removed from spaces because they're Two-Spirit, because of homophobia, and I'll go a little bit into why that happens. So, indigeneity, what is Two-Spirit? I think that as I stand up here, I really need to push out there that I don't consider myself like a pro at this, that this is just something that I'm really exploring, but as I started to feel a little bit more empowered as an Indigenous person, because I've always grown up in the city, I was not connected to language, I was not connected to culture. The only person that was in my life was my mom, who was single, who did an amazing job, who was like the strongest woman that I've ever met. But it was hard for me living in the city because I didn't see people like me, because of institutional racism. There was a lot of mistreatment of me at my schools, and I ended up dropping out of school super, super, super young. And I went out into the streets of downtown and just tried to find people that I could connect with because I didn't have that connection to my community, to my culture. So when I look at what is Two-Spirit, I definitely think that this is something that's a conversation that we're not all pros at. And I think that as people who are non-Indigenous come to events like this, it's really, really important to realize that we're still trying to figure it out too. There's a lot of things that we're really trying to reconnect to, and we're trying to figure out and trying to navigate in our heads, because there's so many things that have affected our community that it's just, again, important to remember that we're still trying to figure it out. So I just want this to be like a conversation piece that what is Two-Spirit? It's a way that people can identify spiritually as a gender or sexually. For me, I don't identify as Two-Spirit sexually, I identify it as a gender, but other people are different. And also, the term Two-Spirit was derived in Winnipeg, and it's kind of like this umbrella term. What would be better is if you go on each territory and go to each tribe and each nation and try and figure out, okay, what did Two-Spirit mean to us specifically, instead of trying to kind of pan it into this like broad thing, because again, each nation is very different. As I stand here, I'm standing next to someone who is Stoney Nakoda. Their people are way different than my people who are Blackfoot and Sitsipi, and so those conversations need to start happening in our communities. Give me 1 second, my mouth's going dry. And I think it's also really important to realize that as we navigate these conversations, indigeneity always has to be considered in these safe spaces, in these panel discussions, these conversations, because our way of life is way different from the way of life that we've been sort of imposed. Like this way of life has been really imposed onto us, and so I think the part of the decolonization process is to realize that we need to consider indigeneity in all of our conversations. So that's a thing. I wanted to show you guys some really badass Two-Spirit folk that are on Turtle Island right now doing some amazing work. And hopefully you guys will go home and kind of check out their work after this presentation. I really encourage you guys to do that. So this is Dana Danger, and she's in Montreal right now. And she's doing this really cool work sort of with being an Indigenous person, also Two-Spirit, but as well as sort of like sex positivity, specifically in the BDSM community. And so if you look at this photograph behind her, she did a photo series where she beaded like a gimp mask, which I think is really cool, and I think it's something that's kind of mixing into our past with our contemporaneous. As Indigenous people, we have connections to our past, to our ancestors, but we're also very contemporary, and I think that it's something that we really need to explore, because again, we are not people of the past. Some of her work also goes around, like, one of my favorites is she sat down with elders and just asked questions like, all right, in your language, how would you say like anal sex, for example, which is like kind of genius to me. I think that's like really interesting, so I really love her work, so definitely check her out. That's Dana Danger. And then this is just another picture of the mask that she beaded. And then this is a book called The Two-Spirit Journey. Somebody had recommended this book to me. It just really goes into the way this person grew up, and just how things affected her, and just how powerful it means to be like a Two-Spirit to this person. So this is a book that's definitely recommended. And this is Joshua Whitehead. I am Joshua Whitehead's #1 fan. Joshua currently lives in Calgary, is from Treaty 1, from Anishinaabe Territory, or Winnipeg. Is currently going to the University of Calgary, but also wrote this amazing book called Full Metal Indigiqueer. Joshua is also coming up with a new book called Johnny Appleseed, and I think there's going to be a release party at Shelf Life Books in Calgary coming up soon, so definitely watch out. His live readings are incredible. He did one at my show for Alter Native, and Joshua was just incredible. He's a really kind soul, so definitely check Joshua out. And we also have Ezra Green. So Ezra Green is a water protector. Is Two-Spirit. Recently, just like bike locked their neck to one of the Kinder Morgan pipelines, and was like, just really fighting against that. Also started the camp in Toronto for Tina Fontaine and Colton Wushi, the ones that were also sort of in solidarity with what happened here, what happened in Winnipeg, what happened in Regina. So Ezra's super badass. And then, does everybody know who this is? Who is it? Kent Monkman. Kent Monkman is incredible, is like one of our most talented and amazing painters of our time right now. And if you don't know who Kent Monkman is, I really urge, again, with all of these people, but strongly urge that you check out Kent Monkman's work. Okay. So, as I sort of told you guys about these amazing Two-Spirit, it's just a really good reminder that Women in Two-Spirit are the backbone of every tribe, but again, our elders are telling us that it's these people who are going to be the leaders and the ones that are going to be changing things for our futures. So again, stop forgetting us. Stop forgetting us. We are here and we have voices and they need to be heard. All right, so you know when I was telling you about how people were being removed from powwows because of being Two-Spirit or being removed from spaces in general just because of who they are? There's a lot of different reasons because of that. So for one, colonization, attempted genocide, Christianity, residential school, the doctrine of discovery, assimilation, racism, hate, homophobia, transphobia, a bunch of different other things. They're all to blame for this. Again, all of these things were imposed onto our communities. None of these existed before colonization. And I think it's really, really freaking important to remember that. So I just wanted to quickly all of these things you can go into your own talks, but these are some of the reasons why our community are really suffering from this kind of hate and really showing this intolerance towards Two-Spirit people. Respect for LGBTQIA+ and Two-Spirit people is essential to colonization. We need to start bringing their voices, including them into everything that's going on in the community, because we can no longer continue leaving out a huge part of our community that can really help change things. I think that's really important. Decolonization is a really weird word for me. I don't know what that means, but I feel like if we're gonna start that journey, it's including our Two-Spirit Indigenous queer people into our communities and into our spaces. Okay, I really, really wanted to talk to you, how much time? 5 minutes? Okay. I really wanted to quickly talk about the TRC's 94 calls to action and the UN's Declaration of Rights for Indigenous People as well. Who do you think they forgot in both of those? Yes, I heard it. Indigenous queers and Two-Spirit people. I think that the Truth and Reconciliation Commission's 94 calls to action is amazing, but again, it's forgetting a huge part of our community, as well as UN's Declaration of Rights for Indigenous People. It was actually Joshua Whitehead who had brought that up to me, and I had no idea about that before, but it's something that I really try to bring up to the community and to people so they understand. So I think that it's really important to implement these things into our workplaces, into our nonprofit organizations, into our homes even, but also remember and criticize these things as well, and try and figure out ways that you can include communities into these spaces when you implement these things. I also wanted to talk about missing and murdered Indigenous women, the whole movement, and how often girls in Two-Spirit are also left out of that conversation, as well as boys and men. But when I look at the movement, or when I hear people talk about it, all I hear is missing and murdered Indigenous women. And again, stop forgetting us. We're a part of this community, and there's so many of us who have gone missing, who have been murdered, and we need to remember them. We need to also remember that they can't be forgotten. So when you talk about missing and murdered Indigenous women, also include girls in Two-Spirit. It's really, really important that you do that. And one of the last things that I wanted to talk about is criticizing safe spaces and why representation is important. A poem. So I was asked to help an organization write a zine about basically writing 2 pages on how to create a safe space for Indigenous people. And that was something that I really, really struggled with, and it was hard for me to write that because the number one thing is it doesn't exist. So in response to my feelings and the hard emotions I had about not being able to write anything about safe spaces, I wrote a poem. Right, so I'm gonna read it to you. So my poem is, it's important to remember that 1, Columbus was a little bee, pun intended. And 2, colonialism still happens today, and it may be perpetuated by you as much as it sucks to admit. First, you must understand that this way of life is not ours, and as much as we are resilient and adaptable, our true way of life was taken away from us. And no, Becky, I'm not going to stop smudging because you're allergic to my medicine. Go somewhere else while I revive my beautiful culture. So this is kind of in response to also, in response to a couple workspaces that I was in that did welcome, Indigenous people to come and work and to sort of educate the youth or the public about things, but would also kind of take our rights away from us, like smudging, like our right to smudge which is under the UNDRIP. And we would have people saying that, you can't smudge here anymore. And that's also like a thing that's an issue right now too, is that there's not a lot of businesses or places or spaces that are allowing us to smudge. That's our medicine, that's a part of who we are. And if you want to be a part of that decolonization process or reconciliation, then you need to allow us to be able to revive and to be able to heal in those kinds of ways. And when I kind of said reconciliation like that, sorry, it's because I don't really believe in it. I don't think it exists. I think that when you think of reconciliation, and this is a quote from Leonard Summer, who lives in Winnipeg, is when you think of reconciliation, that means that there's usually two parties, and those two parties have both done something wrong. But when you look at Indigenous people in our history, I don't think we've done anything wrong. And so for me, instead of saying reconciliation, I think that we need to find our Indigenous language and find the words that translate or mean to do right. I think that reconciliation is sort of this term that, we keep kind of jumping on, but we haven't even allowed our communities to really, again, figure it out. We haven't allowed ourselves to even try and understand what has happened and how these things have really affected us individually. And I think that to move forward, we no longer can try to go towards this goal of reconciliation throughout this nation or throughout this land. It's going to be something that's very individual. It's going to be something that's going to be happening within our own communities. And so I really don't know if reconciliation exists because I feel like the context of it isn't right. So, and again, if we're talking about the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, well, shouldn't we have some time to talk about our truths first? Shouldn't we have time to be angry? Are we allowed to be? I think that it's really important to just to go through our emotions and to talk with each other and just figure out okay, what that happened and how do we fix this? How do we make things better for our future? Because I know as Indigenous people, we don't do this for ourselves. We do this for our future. We do this for our generation. We do this for our kids. We don't do this for ourselves. So I think that's something that's really humbling. But it's tough. It's tough, especially if you go around and everything's plastered with reconciliation, and it just makes you feel a little bit smaller, a little bit powerless because you understand that that's not really for you. So, safer spaces, they don't exist either. But something that was brought to me that I thought was really, really amazing is something called accountable spaces. Safe spaces, I think we need to stop using that term. Again, I don't think that it exists. And if it does, it's really only for white people, I'm not gonna lie. Because when you go into those spaces, it's already presumed that you understand, that you have this level of education, that you have this level of awareness that, if you go in there and you start talking, people, they might get upset because you've asked a question. And for me, if you look into the people who are coming into these spaces, a lot of them might be from the reservation, and if you look at what's going on over there, you would understand that, things aren't equal. They were never equal. You have kids who are in grade 7 out on the reserves who are illiterate. How is that fair? So how do you expect people who are coming from the reserves to come into these spaces that are apparently safe, and if they don't understand, some of these terms and they get ripped apart for that, how is that safe? So I think that accountable spaces is a great thing because, also as Indigenous people, when we come to a space and we introduce ourselves, a lot of the time you're going to hear what nation you come from because you are keeping yourself accountable to your people, to the people that you are connected with. And so, I don't know, I think that we need to criticize and we need to look into what it means to be a safe space or an accountable space that's also intersectional and also representative. Because if you go into these spaces and there's nobody that looks like you, then how is that going to make you feel? If you go into a space and say that there's people that you can talk to, but none of them look like you, are you going to feel comfortable with that? I don't think so. I wouldn't. If there's an incident that happened that involved homophobia and also racism, I'm probably not going to feel comfortable talking to someone who doesn't come from my community, and that's why I think representation is really, really, really important, especially in our workspaces. I just got hired at the library in Forest Lawn, and it makes me feel amazing that I can be there because there's a lot of Indigenous youth that are going to that location, and I think there's a lot of people that still have a lot of learning to do, like what is intergenerational trauma, and how does that affect our youth, and how does that affect the way that they interact with people? It's these are the things that we're in a time where we really still have to explain things, but we also need to create those spaces where, our people can talk with each other and not have to explain things, where you talk to somebody and they understand what you're going through. I think that's really, really important. So, I don't know, accountable spaces, I like that a lot better than safe spaces. I'm a huge critic of safe spaces, and so I think that we still need to have conversation about how we readdress that, because I don't think it's working for a lot of people. And we kind of come to the end of my presentation. Sorry I sort of rushed through that. 20 minutes has been a lot of time, but it gave me a lot of hope actually to make this presentation. I did a lot of research, and this is actually a painting that was done at a workshop that I facilitated. And it was a lot of youth from Ghana, and the workshop was, how do we talk about trauma through art? Because there's a huge opiate crisis happening out there. It's such an issue in southern Alberta that the hotel that I was staying at, there was somebody who was overdosing. And one of the things that it made me realize is that right now might not be the time to be talking. Right now is actually time for action. We have a lot of people within our community that are dying, that are passing away, that are overdosing. There's a lot of children out there that are taking care of their parents, or a lot of children that are watching their parents go through addiction and possibly go through an overdose. So it's really important, I think, that everybody go through that training, get the kit. Michelle, what's the kit called?
A naloxone kit.
Everybody, I really urge that you do that. You get that kit, you carry it around with you, because it's a huge issue. If you can and you have the resources, bring those kids to the reserve, because it's the youth out there that are being affected by that. It's the youth out there that are going through the, seeing their community go through that. So right now isn't necessarily the time for talking, it's time for action. We need to start saving lives. So this is one of the paintings that the youth did, and I kept it, it's in my room right now. But yeah, I think that's the end. I was gonna show another trailer to a film, but I don't think there's enough time. If you guys want, I have a huge list of resources. I know I didn't do a lot of talking, I know this was short, I did it really fast, but I'm gonna post on the Facebook page just a list of resources for TRC, the TRC, 94 Calls to Action, UNDRIP. Also, I'm gonna see if I can also post the accountability rules that was created by the Anti-Racism Organizational Change Project. That's something that might be good to look through. If you are facilitating workshops, if you're facilitating conversations, I think it's just really good to read through that. Amongst other things, the names of the artists as well. But again, please just remember to stop forgetting us, to include us in anything that you do, to remember where we aren't included in government, documentation, or in agencies or in organizations, and to remember that we're powerful, we have a voice, we have a lot of things that we can do to help change the future for our communities, and we're here, and we're not going away. So I think that's it. Thank you so much, and I'm going to hand the microphone off back to Taylor.
Thank you, Danny, for your story. It was so inspirational and funny and honest, and it needed to be heard. And it just made me realize that a lot of things she said, as an Indigenous person, as Indigenous woman, there's a lot of things that I didn't know about. It just makes me realize that, well, what if, as an Indigenous person, if I don't know these things, what do non-Indigenous people know? So thank you for sharing that. We're just going to put the screen, get the other two speakers back on stage, and we're going to do a quick 15-minute Q&A, and then we'll close up for the afternoon. So give us about a minute or two, and then we'll start the Q&A.
Okay, who's the first one to ask a question to these ladies and these pretty women here? You want to hear a joke? Okay, you know this, we went to this restaurant and looking at the menu and the old man looking at it, and he was looking at it, and the waitress come walking in. You know how those waitress walk. May I help you, sir? What can I do for you, sir? And the old man said, do you have chicken legs? Oh, pig's feet? And she said, oh no, it's just the way I walk. Humor is part of our healing, at least for me, is humor. And so that's one of the jokes I like to tell. Okay, do you have any questions? Go.
I have a
For who?
question. I have a question.
Oh, okay, sorry.
Hi. I find myself very, very moved and emotional a lot in the last couple of years, seeing the momentum and the good things that are happening with just the awareness. And I also feel helpless as far as knowing how to be part of the change. And I wondered if you have any suggestions.
I would say one of them is right now you being here today. That's one of the ways. See, and to keep asking, talking to people, especially the people that have gone through that road. Because I finally accepted the fact that I'm a warrior. Okay? And I'm going to be a warrior till the day I die. And part of that, for me, I have a lot of friends, non-native, in my family, and you heard me mention that. And part of why that happens because I reach out to people. I speak the truth. I speak the truth because that's how I was taught. That's how I was taught. Yes, it was taken away because of residential school and all of that. I've gone through 3 residential schools. I have gone through domestic abuse. I've gone through addiction, and still sitting here talking. But you know what? I didn't do it alone. I did not do it alone. I had people like you that helped me to, you know, they used to say, I always used to hear that Lethbridge was a very prejudiced town. I can go to Lethbridge any time of the week. Wherever I go, I get treated very well by the people there. Now, I think it's because of the way I approach people, the way I open the doors to them. Because people like you opened your doors to me. You took the time of day to help me to be who I am. And so a lot of times people don't go, they don't grow because you're blaming yourself. You know, yes, we see, you hear it a lot, and I'm very sorry, but yes, it was Columbus' fault. So we'll take it up with him when we get up there. And he's the one that called us Indians, and we're not even Indians. So does that help a little bit?
Yes, it does. To feel welcomed to approach and ask questions is really good advice, and it's really helpful. Thank you.
Okay, Nixoka. Mr. Nakota, Kerse Norto Kana, Norto Samyolix. My question is directed towards Elder and Sotaki. You guys mentioned about the church and the TCR, about trying to get the church to accept the TCR. Well, I was sitting here, it just dawned on me, why do we have to try to accept the church to accept these things? People talk about decolonization. Well, decolonization could be, let's tell them to leave. Since that's not our practice, Anglican and the Roman Catholic. If they're not to accept that, then let's work towards our people and say that this was forced upon us. And if you don't want to accept that, like a fine example is I think a couple of weeks ago, our Prime Minister went to the Vatican and talked to, I think it's Pope Francis. I'm not sure, I'm not Catholic. The Pope didn't want to apologize to what the church, to the atrocities, to the need to be a First Nations people. Well, then they're not serious about reconciliation. So why should we ask for forgiveness from them? Why don't we just work on our people and say, well, that's not our way. You want to make that sin known. That's not our way of believing. So I think this is my own view. That's the way to deal with them. Just to work hard. And well, that's just me. Like I come from a community on the Blood Reserve. We're called the Sweet Up Being. There used to be an old church that was on top of the hill, a Roman Catholic church. Somebody burned it. Nobody took accountability who burned it. But there are some people who are very sad that it was burned, but a lot of young people are quite happy about it. And the St. Mary's residential school on the Blood Reserve, it burned down. And there were some people who were very sad, but I know a lot of young people and a lot of people who went to residential school were happy that building burned down. So that's just my way of thinking. Why should we ask the church about reconciliation, or they don't want it? Well, tell them to leave. Again.
Thank you. I didn't hear you guys cheering when he spoke Blackfoot, by the way. We already broke the rule. Yes, I'm really glad that you brought that up. And in terms of just acknowledging the comment about the Pope, we don't need an apology from him. And honestly, like, when I read that, it was just another thing that, could have been devastating. But I'm kind of at this point in my journey where I'm really angry with the church. I'm really pissed off. I'm probably would have been one of the youth that might have been kind of happy about hearing about that, because like the injustices that have been done to our people from the church, from the Anglican Church, the Roman Catholics, are atrocious. An apology isn't enough, and again, like reconciliation doesn't exist. And for me, working with the church has been really challenging. My family are Anglican, and as I sort of gotten older, I had been sort of pushed into a direction that was important for me to reconnect to my culture and my language. For me, one of the biggest things is that it feels like we're in a time of urgency, that as an Itzitipi, I can't learn my language or my culture because out of like pure just joy and happiness and pride of it, it's out of we have to do this now or it's going to be gone. And for me, I think that there's some people in my family who didn't necessarily accept right away that I wanted to learn my language and my culture, and that was something that was really hard. But now my family is really supporting me in that. But for me, Christianity is going to be here probably forever, but if we lose our way of life, it's gone forever. You're going to have a lot of Indigenous people who look Indigenous, who have nothing to sustain them. They don't have their language anymore, and that's something that a lot of youth are changing. Me working with the Anglican Church of Canada was kind of a funny thing. It was something that I was sort of pushed into, but it was something that they asked me to do because they saw my leadership skills in my community. And it's something that, for me, is experience in realizing how much work it's going to take to have non-Indigenous people change their thoughts. But also, You know, our people are still in the church, and you know, I care about everybody in my community, and if they're going to be a part of, you know, that faith, then I want them to at least, you know, have some type of protection or have a way that when they decide if they want to reconnect to their culture, that it's still going to be there, you know? So, and it's a way to just, you know, really help the church understand, like, you know, their part in it. They know, but do they really know? Do they really understand how much this has affected and, you know, kind of fuck things up for us? You know, it's a way to look at the higher ups in the church and tell them, like, this is what you guys have done and this is what you need to do. I just don't want to see, I don't want to wake up one day and see that, you know, our culture is gone. So it's this line that I don't really know how to navigate, and I don't want to hurt people, I don't want to hurt my family, but I want to be as Indigenous as possible. I want to be Blackfoot. I want to understand what that means. I want to understand how that feels. I want to know how good it feels to be able to speak my language. So in terms of your question, like I do agree with you, but you know, sometimes we're placed into positions that, you know, are unchangeable, and you gotta fight, you know, still for our people. I know it makes you mad, it makes me mad, but I just want to make sure that all our people are protected. So that's why I'm doing that, but it's hard for me sometimes, and I have to admit that.
This is for the filmmaker. Oh, sorry.
Oh, I think we're just gonna finish answering this question.
Oh, okay, yes.
Okay, ik zoek uit weet dat ik dit zo boek te zoeken. That's the only. I was like, that's supposed to so ni beta be so ni kiston. And kiston on kitsta be me no ni iskut ikaya skoki ya akawatsu ko ni akoka mo tapi so ni. That's how we became strong, and we are strong. And I'm one of the people that, no, not going to wait around forever. I don't have time. I don't have time in my life to wait for the Pope to apologize. I don't have time for negativeness in my life anymore. I'm 72 years old, and I don't pretend to know everything, because I don't. I'm still learning. One of the ways that I learned was going back home. I lived in a city, I worked in a city, I learned in the city, I sobered up in the city through help. But I said, hey, I'm going to give you a shocker. So I'm a victim of 3 residential schools. I already said that. I am married to an ex-priest. I am married to him. I love him very much. In me, I have a very forgiving soul. Because Abstadoki, that's what he wanted. So if I can forgive whatever has been done to me by, you know, we like blaming Nabigoiks. We like blaming the white people, but let's stop it. Let's stop it right now, today. Nietzsche Nabigoiks, Sixigay Gaine Goiks, stop it. Let's go back to our cultural way. We've got a beautiful culture. Let's grasp that. Let's teach that to our children, for them to grow into, you know, to be where I'm at. I'm at peace in my heart. I am. I know that. I know that. I know people out there still criticize me. They still point a finger at me. But I don't have time for that. I don't have time for that. Really. You know. I just have to, I have time to love. Those that want to love me back, fine. You don't want to love me, that's fine too, because I don't have time for that negativeness at all. And I just keep going with life. I like my makeup, I like my purple hair. rainbow, the butterfly, new life. And I live that every single day is a new life to me. Do you remember I told you I don't like telling my story? You know, it's not just because I'm married to a priest, ex-priest. It's not because of that. You know, back home, everybody knows who I am. They know who, when you ask, do you know Eileen? They will tell you who I am. That's how well known I am. Because I don't hide anything. God absolutely knows everything. And so, no, I'm not going to wait for the Pope to be. I'm not going to wait for the Prime Minister to be. I'm not going to wait for the Catholic Church. I go to the Catholic Church. I would go there every Sunday. If there's a gathering of elders, prayer, I go there. That's what keeps me strong. I'm a very strong woman. I'm very resilient. That's why I'm here. Me, not here, but in this earth. Because Apisadoki showed me something to give to the people. And that one of it is honesty. And, you know, I don't have to go into my life as an alcoholic because you guys know what the life of an alcoholic is. I don't have to tell my story because just by saying that, you know how my life was. I don't pretend to be somebody that I'm not. And you know what? I really love my Siksika people. I do, because they are very forgiving. They are very, you know, accepting. And out in Siksika, Danielle, the people, my people, Siksika, they don't look down on two-spirited people. Everyone is accepted for who they are. And I'm very, very proud of that. That's where you come to BCHP, Blackfoot Cultural Historical Park. We have a lot of our information on our people. You go there, you'll meet other people there. They'll be welcoming and more than willing to tell you about our people. The good, the good, the good, and the good. You're not going to hear, yes, there's a little section there about residential school, but it's time to let that go. For me, that's what I believe in. It's time to let that residential school issue go. I need to keep moving, and I need my kids to keep moving on. I'm very proud of my grandson. I'm very proud of my family. My oldest son is 52 years old. He's the chief, not a chief, but he's the chief of the Canadian border crossings in 7 ports, BC ports.